There's an argument, too, on the Sanders side that Clinton has been sort of pulled to the left by Sanders and his candidacy. When we travel around, and I think that this would generally be the view you might find in the media as well, to say that it's consensus and the probabilities we discussed a few minutes ago, most people would sort of peg Mrs. Clinton as being the victor next Tuesday, that the House remains in Republican hands, and that the Senate is a toss-up, and if Trump keeps it close, could stay Republican. If Clinton pulls away a little bit, may switch over to the Democrats. What's the market reaction to sort of the consensus position?
Yeah, my own view is that I think that the consensus is Secretary Clinton wins, House stays Republican, but Senate's a toss-up. I think in that case, frankly, the market probably yawns, because I think it is the consensus. It's hard not to see it being priced in. Our own proprietary measures kind of suggest that's the case. What I have to say, what frightens me a little bit, obviously, is one would be a sweep of either party. It's hard to imagine a Republican sweep, but a Democratic sweep, I think, would be disconcerting, too, in terms of capital. Certainly very highly regulated industries like pharmaceuticals or financials would certainly don't seem to be priced for that. I'd also say that Mrs. Clinton winning, and this again gets into media. We were talking about this in it wasn't really cocktail; it was water hour. We had water back there before, but we were talking about it before we got up here. And one of the things that worries me the most from a market perspective is that once the Klieg lights are off Donald Trump from the media, let's say he loses. Let's say the consensus is correct, and he loses, and then Hillary Clinton's standing there alone on the stage. If you're just to try to be fair about it, the things that are being revealed now, it's not hard to see that being a real problem for a new president, especially in a media that likes to eat its own, right? I mean, if it bleeds, it leads, and without the kind of ongoing circus that is Donald Trump, people might go to another circus and say, let's take a look at something else. And that, I would say, that's one risk I just wanted to put out there that we're trying to warn our clients about. And if you know Wilma Rousseff in Brazil, it was, I don't want to put it quite in the same thing, but it was somewhat similar. She was very much a darling, of kind of the liberal establishment in Brazil. Media was very much on her side, on her, kind of supporting her. And then, unfortunately, a lot of the other issues kind of overwhelmed all of that. And so that's just one thing to, I think, kind of keep in mind as we go into next year. And again, I'm not making a value judgment on it. I'm just trying to handicap what I think is likely to happen. Nick does a lot of our earnings and our sector work. And Nick, I think one of the problems that you've identified for investors is that earnings have been so much under pressure because top line is so much under pressure. And so I guess the question is there anything these two characters can do to get growth going again, to get top line going again?
I think there's, I might even phrase it to say that we're in an environment that generally as it plays out, financial repression or periods of deleveraging, they don't generally play themselves out in the context of a single cycle. Right? If we go back to look at financial history, they're usually multi-cycle phenomena. And as a function of that, we've exacerbated a little bit of the problem by the application of monetary policy. So we can certainly get into a debate or even a discussion about what do low interest rates do and who benefits from that and who doesn't. And it's probably in part fueling, I think, a lot of the populism that Jason speaks to and that's in the system. But one of the other elements is that it leads to these low nominal growth outcomes. And so a low nominal growth environment would be the lack of unit demand growth and a lack of pricing power. And in that type of scenario, particularly one in which companies and individuals are trying to sort of fix their balance sheets, it doesn't generate a lot of top line growth. There's not a lot of revenue in the system. And so all of the a vast majority of the earnings growth that companies have been able to produce during this cycle has come from these special financial lifts, these special conditions, and you could argue that that is in fact also how we've gotten a lot of price appreciation. So when you turn it back to the election, you turn it back to policy, I would say it's almost universal in my travels. I happened to be in Asia 2 weeks ago, and the very sort of day or two later, the last week in the Midwest. And I would say almost universally, people say there has to be a fiscal response. There must be some sort of government spending initiative, however constructed, that could drive the engine of growth, because we're not getting it from consumption, right? We're not really getting it from investment. Sort of the CapEx phenomena is more of a replacement phenomena. And so ultimately, a fiscal response is probably necessary. The big political concern is how quickly can you get that fiscal response into the system? If you'll recall the financial crisis in 2009, President Bush and really Secretary Paulson and President Clinton and really Secretary Geithner, who succeeded them, negotiated a huge $900 billion fiscal stimulus program that went into effect in 2009. I know all of you are from the tri-state area. I live up in Connecticut, in southern Connecticut. The money that Connecticut got from that plan, they decided to pave roads, and they did it in 2012, and the market was up 140% from that time. So the time to shovel ready is a long one. So I'm very focused, and I think that the team is very focused on the budget deal that the president and Speaker Ryan negotiated last year, which was really sort of 40% last year and 60% this year, stacked on fiscal stimulus and driving economic growth. And when you think about, hey, can Clinton, if the status quo were to play out, if Clinton can sit down and negotiate with a Speaker Ryan, can they get a big fiscal stimulus package? She's talking about a $600 billion package, so slightly smaller than we saw in 2009. But Speaker Ryan has his own issues. And this is potentially where the game changer is. He may have sort of the most loosely affiliated caucus that any speaker has had in a broad succession of years. But if he can get from President Clinton and from Democrats generally the ability to repatriate foreign profits, which President Trump would be very much on board with doing himself, that could bring $1 trillion back into this country. Even at the preferred tax rates, and that would be, extremely stimulative to growth. So we don't want to pin all of our hopes on that, but I think if Republicans generally don't love shovel-ready, they prefer tax cuts, they may get one as a pay-for, and that could certainly change the calculus and move the needle. So certainly when we talk to corporations from the vantage point of our capital markets area, and when we simply just look at from an investor's vantage point, what would inspire you? Fiscal stimulus is among them, and repatriation certainly would be a big part of that.